On May 29th, 2003, Thomas Friedman made his famous visit to the, oh gosh, I can't even remember his name now.
Charlie Rose.
Charlie Rose. I used to be obsessed with the Charlie Rose show around this time and prior to it, actually. And gave an explanation as to the invasion. This is now 4 months into it, 3 months into it, when it starting to become clear there are no weapons of mass destruction. There's still this sort of bizarre belief that somehow we're going to impose a democracy in Iraq by killing, I guess, all the non-democratic forces, presumably. And people like Thomas Friedman needed to go out and sell their part in selling the war to the American public. And probably one of the highlights of my pundit career was going on to the Dylan Ratigan show, maybe in 2012, maybe 8-9 years after this moment. Thomas Friedman had tried to get this clip pulled down many, many, many times over the years because he was quite embarrassed by it. People would go up to him on the street and say stuff like this. And on the Dylan Ratigan show, in the context of, I think, like, Occupy, if I remember correctly, I was able to repeat his words to him in some fashion. But let's first hear this. This is important because there's a lot of people who listen to this show, if I can believe the YouTube data anyways. I don't know if it's the same on the audio podcast. But 75% of the people who watch this show on YouTube are younger than me, and significantly younger than me. And so this is important to understand. Thomas Friedman now is just a lunatic who writes about, I don't know what he wrote the other day. Well,
he went to have lunch with Biden, and he wrote about the food that that was served to him in this like masturbatory New York Times op-ed, but also about how Biden needs to appeal to the moderate Republican voter. It's the same garbage over and over again.
And Thomas Friedman was instrumental in selling the war to a wide swath of liberals in this country. And by liberals, it's not the same word 20 some odd years ago as it is today. You had people like, Glenn Greenwald has written that he was on board with George Bush's war at the time because maybe they paid very little attention to politics or something to that effect. And there was a whole host of people like that who, I feel like my parents were like that. Well, if Thomas Friedman says it's okay, he's no, right-winger. And listen to what he had to say on March 29th, 2003.
Now that the war is over and there's some difficulty with the peace, was it worth doing?
Well, I think it was unquestionably worth doing, Charlie. And I think that looking back, I now certainly feel I understand more what the war was about. And it's interesting to talk about it here in Silicon Valley, because I think looking back at the 1990s, I can identify that there were actually three bubbles of the 1990s. There was the NASDAQ bubble. There was the corporate governance bubble. And lastly, there was what I would call the terrorism bubble. And the first two were based on creative accounting. The last was based on moral creative accounting. The terrorism bubble that basically built up over the 1990s said, flying airplanes into the World Trade Center, that's okay. Wrapping yourself with dynamite and blowing up Israelis in a pizza parlor, that's okay. Because we're weak and they're strong and the weak have a different morality. Having your preachers say that's okay, that's okay. Having your charities raise money for people who do these kinds of things, that's okay. And having your press call people who do these kind of things martyrs, that's okay. And that built up as a bubble, Charlie. And 9/11 to me was the peak of that bubble. And what we learned on 9/11 in a gut way was that that bubble was a fundamental threat to our open society. Because there is no wall high enough, no INS agent smart enough, no metal detector efficient enough to protect an open society from people motivated by that bubble.
I want to pause right here because we're going to get to, but I just, this part of okay, pause it. We got to pause it, pause. Wait, what's going on? All right, so I want you to go back a little bit. That part of what Friedman says doesn't get enough attention in this because of what he's about to say. But think about what the threats are to an open society in this country now and around the West. And I would argue, and I think you can read Spencer Ackerman's book in some way touched on this, that it was the response to 9/11 and the idea that we could do whatever we wanted to whomever a number of people, depending on whose estimates, anywhere killing from hundreds of thousands, that's the Defense Department's estimation of innocent civilians, to over 1 million in Iraq for something that had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing to do with the terrorism that he's talking about, nothing to do with the imams and the martyrs, none of that stuff that he talked about, none of it. And we killed anywhere from a couple hundred thousands to 1 million people. It does, whose numbers do you want to use? Everybody agrees we created millions and millions of refugees, internal and external. We destabilized the region. On and on and on. So you think about the greatest threats that we have today. So many of them are traceable back to the way our society changed after that moment, both politically, both in terms of the national security state, in terms of the way that we faced the rest of the world, which is not to say that we had, a great reputation necessarily before then. But, in the great scheme of things, Iraq, particularly after having done Vietnam, we killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
For I don't know if there is a good reason, but for really no reason except for this idea in this guy's head that there was some type of bubble.
Yeah, the terrorism bubble.
Talk about creative moral accounting.
My God.
But listen to what he says after this.
After making basically a cultural critique of Muslim people and claiming that their morality of the weak is what drives them here.
Right. As if like the notion of like, this is a new idea that asymmetric warfare is legitimate because we've been oppressing. Yeah, but continue.
In a gut way, was that bubble was a fundamental threat to our open society. Because there is no wall high enough, no INS agent smart enough, no metal detector efficient enough to protect an open society from people motivated by that bubble. And what we needed to do was go over to that part of the world, I'm afraid, and burst that bubble. We needed to go over there, basically, and take out a very big stick, right in the heart of that world, and burst that bubble. And there was only one way to do it. Because part of that bubble said, we've got you. This bubble is actually going to level the balance of power between us and you because we don't care about life. We're ready to sacrifice, and all you care about are your stock options and your Hummers. And what they needed to see was American boys and girls going house to house from Basra to Baghdad and basically saying, which part of this sentence don't you understand? You don't think, we care about our open society? You think this bubble fantasy, we're just going to let it grow? Well, suck on this, okay? That, Charlie, was what this war was about. We could have hit Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, he goes on to say, no, let it keep going here for a second.
It was part of that bubble. Could have hit Pakistan. We hit Iraq because we could. That's the real truth.
The mess.
Yeah.
Because we could.
Because we could. Because if we had gone into Saudi Arabia, it would have cost us oil. If we'd gone into Pakistan, we would have started some version of World War III.
So the Iraq was our way to say to that that part of the region, that region of the world, suck on this. You're going to taste the blood from the bloodbath that we cause, and it's going to level the balances of power just a little bit.
The idea is we were using those hundreds of thousands or million Iraqi civilians. This is the way we're going to teach you a lesson. I mean, think about, I don't know where Thomas Friedman is on, any other conflict that's going on right now. But think about that concept. That's what he's saying. He is saying we need to kill a sufficient number of these people to say, hey, don't mess with us because we'll come and kill an enormous amount of your people. Now, we could have done it somewhere else, like with people who might have had some more direct culpability. Vaguely. None of these civilians did.
Yeah, but they were brown. They were Muslim.
But look.
Suck on this.
Iraq, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, what's the diff? Let's just take out some expendables and show the world that we can do it.
It escaped me the first time. I mean, I'm just looking on the suggested videos, and 5 years ago we did an anniversary video of this clip too. But that he explicitly puts it in the terms of rape, like we have a big stick and we say suck on this. Like imagine if like a Russian propaganda said that about the Ukraine invasion. Like we would all know how to code that.
Exactly. I mean, this is a demented human being.
Yeah.
Still
in the New York Times
controlling the real estate on perhaps the most important newspaper in the world.
I mean, first of all, he opens this piece talking about, I could tell you two things at the White House. What I ate and how I felt after, right? So it's just ridiculous in detail, the food he ate at the White House. But go to the end, if you could, Matt, all the way at the bottom, because this is the part that I think is, it's just ridiculous. These final three paragraphs. Talking basically about the gridlock in Washington. Biden is not blameless in this dilemma, nor is the Democratic Party, particularly its far left wing. Under pressure to revive the economy and facing big ticket demands from the far left, Biden pursued expansive spending for too long. House Democrats also sullied one of Biden's most important bipartisan achievements, a giant infrastructure bill, by making it hostage to other excessive spending
Pause
demands.
it for 1 second.
Yeah.
Pause it for 1 second.
Pause my voice.
I'm sorry.
It's funny.
This is, okay, first of all, pursued expansive spending for too long. There was one bill that took place in February, March. This guy is upset, presumably because there are labor shortages. He is he's married to a billionaire heiress. I can't remember exactly which one. The idea that one can sully a bipartisan achievement is just one of the most bizarre. The bill passed. Granted, it passed and sunk what Biden's fundamental primary achievement was to be that he won the election on. But Sully, what the F does this mean?
No, by being upset that Build Back Better didn't pass. I mean, it says by holding it hostage, right? Where is it? Holding it hostage to other excessive spending demands. Dude, it passed. It wasn't held hostage. In fact, they were separated, much to the chagrin of progressives, and it was not held hostage. But just because that was a demand or proposed by members of the left in the House, he's, just because they wanted to achieve that, he's saying that it sullied it.
All right, he goes on to say, defeat Trumpism, we need 10% of Republicans to abandon their party. Well, here's the point. There is no 10% of Republicans that are going to be, contemplate this idea. 10%, that is an enormous amount of Republicans who are going to decide post-Trump That we're no longer going to be with Trump.
Well, he says that it's not going to happen, but he blames the far left Democrats because they're, quote, defining the party's future. That's the way to do it. Even though it was the Democratic leadership and the centrists who killed Build Back Better. They were the ones that did it, not the left. But it doesn't really matter. You can still put it in print in the New York Times anyway.
But understand what this part of this project is. By all accounts, and it's not necessarily marked in stone, but there's a lot of people who believe that the Democrats are going to get really annihilated, particularly in the House, come the fall. And particularly with what's happened with the redistricting in New York, there is a secular favoring, a structural favoring of Republicans to win, on top of which there is a sort of cyclical nature of Republicans to win. The party that is in office in the presidency usually loses in the off-year elections. This is the beginning or part of a project to blame the left for the failures of the Democrats in the fall. It's all part of that project. But fortunately, the number of people who listen to Thomas Friedman is diminished. And I promise you, we will mark this anniversary. Certainly we'll do it for the 20th anniversary. And maybe we'll take it to every 5 years until he passes on. I will say this. If you remind me, and I have retired before he passes away, because, you know, with that kind of money, they can put you on all sorts of machines for a long time. You live forever. Like, you just have like some...
You'll get that
Put that brain in a vat.
You get that Kissinger diet, right?
I mean, Kissinger diet, or maybe you get the
blood of children.
The blood of children. They start to transfuse, whatever it is. I'll come out of retirement to mark that clip. And that's why we keep making these videos, too. There's only so many of these things they can take down. So, happy anniversary to the Suck on This. Oh, I should say.
Suck on this video, in fact.
I said, so I was on the Dylan Ratigan show.
Yeah.
I turned to Thomas Friedman, and we were talking about...
I can't believe you sat next to him without...
I was across the thing.
Yeah.
And I was just waiting for this opportunity, and we were talking about Occupy. We didn't get to anything that I could deal with it head on. And I said, but aren't the wealthy in this country just saying to the rest of the people in this country, suck on this? And he looked at me, and he said something, and then during the entire break, he's just staring at me, and I'm just going like this to him. And just the idea that he had to go home that night and wonder... Was
he wondering, though?
Yes. Oh, my understanding is very sensitive about that.
No, I mean, but of course, he wasn't wondering. Like, it must have been clear that you were messing with him.
At the moment, he was. At the moment, it wasn't.
Well, then he's not very bright either.
He's also.
Yeah, you want to be
bright.
denial, I guess, too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was enough to make every stupid hit that I had done on cable television worth it at that point. I got into a fight with Pataki too, but that's another story.